The morning sun painted the vast plains golden as Chief Running Bear stood outside his lodge, watching the young warriors practice their skills. His weathered hands gripped his walking staff, and his eyes followed one particular figure among the group. His son, Swift Arrow, moved with the grace of a mountain cat and the strength of a charging buffalo. At 20 winters old, Swift Arrow had proven himself in 3 battles and earned the respect of every warrior in the tribe. Running Bear remembered the day Swift Arrow was born. The medicine man had declared that this child would bring great change to their people. Now, looking at his son's proud stance and fierce determination, the chief believed those words were true. Swift Arrow had grown into everything a father could hope for, brave, honorable, and wise beyond his years. The Lakota tribe had ancient customs that governed their way of life. One of the most sacred traditions stated that when a chief's son came of age and proved his worth in battle, he would be granted the honor of choosing any unmarried woman from the tribe as his wife. This tradition had been followed for countless generations, and Running Bear himself had chosen his beloved wife, Morning Star, in the same way many years ago. Swift Arrow approached his father after the morning training. Sweat glistened on his bronze skin, and his long black hair was tied back with leather strips decorated with eagle feathers. "Father," he said, bowing his head respectfully, "the elders have spoken. They say I have earned the right to choose." Running Bear nodded slowly. He had been expecting this conversation for weeks. The tribal council had indeed confirmed that Swift Arrow had fulfilled all requirements of manhood. He had killed his first buffalo, counted coup on 3 enemies, and led a successful horse raid against their rivals, the Crow tribe. "Yes, my son, the time has come. Tomorrow, when the sun reaches its highest point, you may choose any maiden in our tribe to be your wife." Swift Arrow's heart raced with excitement and nervousness. He had thought about this moment for months. There were several beautiful and accomplished young women in the tribe. There was Singing Bird, daughter of the medicine man, known for her skill in beadwork and her sweet voice. There was Laughing Water, the fastest runner among all the women, who could track animals better than most men. And there was Dancing Feather, whose beauty was spoken of even by visiting tribes. That evening, Running Bear called for a great feast to celebrate his son's achievement and to announce the choosing ceremony. The entire tribe gathered around the central fire pit. Women prepared the finest foods: roasted venison, wild rice, dried berries, and corn cakes. The drums began their rhythmic beating, and the storytellers shared tales of great warriors and their marriages. As the fire crackled and sparked flew into the star-filled sky, Running Bear stood before his people. His voice carried across the gathering like rolling thunder. "My brothers and sisters, tomorrow we will witness a sacred ceremony. My son, Swift Arrow, has proven himself worthy. He will choose his bride according to our ancient ways." The crowd murmured with approval and anticipation. Young, unmarried women felt their hearts flutter with hope and nervousness. Mothers whispered advice to their daughters about standing tall and showing their best qualities. Fathers discussed the honor it would bring to have their daughter chosen by the chief's son. Swift Arrow sat beside his father, trying to appear calm, but his mind was spinning. How could he choose just one? Each of the eligible women had qualities that would make them a good wife. He needed someone who could stand beside him when he eventually became chief. Someone who could bear strong children and help lead their people. Running Bear noticed his son's uncertainty. "My boy," he said quietly, leaning closer, "do not choose with your eyes alone. Choose with your heart and your spirit. The right woman will make herself known to you." As the evening continued, an old woman approached the chief. She was Wise Owl, the eldest member of their tribe and keeper of their most ancient traditions. Her back was bent with age, but her eyes still held the spark of intelligence and knowledge accumulated over 8 decades of life. "Chief Running Bear," she said, her voice cracked but strong, "I must speak with you about tomorrow's ceremony." Running Bear gestured for her to continue. "What wisdom do you bring, grandmother?" Wise Owl glanced around to ensure no one else could hear. "There is something you must know about the captives we took in our last raid. The pale woman we brought back, there is more to her story than we first understood." 3 months earlier, Swift Arrow had led a raiding party against a settlement of white settlers who had been stealing their horses and hunting on sacred ground. During the raid, they had captured several people, including a woman with skin pale as birch bark and hair the color of autumn wheat. She had been traveling with the settlers, but something about her seemed different from the others. The captive woman, who the tribe simply called Pale Horse because of her light coloring, had adapted to life in the village better than anyone expected. Unlike other captives who remained sullen and tried to escape, she seemed to understand their ways. She learned their language quickly, helped with daily tasks, and showed respect for their customs. Some of the tribal women had begun to accept her presence, though she remained an outsider. "What do you know about this woman?" Running Bear asked Wise Owl. The old woman's eyes grew distant, as if seeing something from long ago. "I have watched her closely, Chief. The way she moves, the way she speaks our language. It is not the first time she has lived among our people. I believe she was once one of us, taken as a child many winters ago." Running Bear's face grew serious. If this was true, it would change everything. Children taken by other tribes and raised among strangers sometimes lost all memory of their birth families, especially if they were very young when captured. "Are you certain of this, grandmother?" he asked. Wise Owl nodded slowly. "I have lived long enough to remember when children disappeared during the great troubles with the Blue Soldiers. There was a raid on our winter camp nearly 25 winters ago. Several children were lost. Some were taken by soldiers, others by settlers fleeing west. I believe this woman was one of those children." As the fire burned lower and the celebration continued around them, Running Bear pondered this new information. If the captive woman was truly one of their own people, returned after so many years, it would be a miracle. But it would also complicate tomorrow's ceremony in ways he could not yet imagine. Swift Arrow noticed his father's serious conversation with Wise Owl, but did not interrupt. He spent the rest of the evening observing the young women of the tribe, trying to imagine which one would stand beside him as his wife. He thought about the qualities he needed in a partner: strength, kindness, wisdom, and loyalty. As the celebration finally wound down and people began returning to their lodges, Swift Arrow made his way to his sleeping furs. Tomorrow would bring one of the most important decisions of his life. He closed his eyes and asked the spirits to guide him toward the right choice. Meanwhile, in a small lodge on the edge of the village, the woman called Pale Horse sat by her small fire, working on a pair of moccasins. Her hands moved skillfully with the needle and sinew, creating intricate beadwork patterns that seemed to come naturally to her. She had no idea that tomorrow's ceremony would change her life forever, or that the answer to questions she had carried in her heart for 25 years was about to be revealed. The sun climbed high into the clear blue sky as the entire tribe gathered in the center of the village. Women had spent the morning braiding their hair with colorful ribbons and putting on their finest dresses decorated with porcupine quills and beautiful beadwork. The unmarried women stood in a special group, their mothers having given them final words of encouragement and advice. Swift Arrow emerged from his father's lodge, wearing his ceremonial clothing. His buckskin shirt was decorated with symbols representing his victories in battle: 3 eagle feathers for his 3 enemy scalps, bear claws for his strength, and turquoise stones for protection. His long hair was braided with silver ornaments that caught the sunlight. He looked every bit the future chief he was destined to become. Running Bear stood before the assembled tribe, his voice carrying the weight of tradition and authority. My people, today we continue the ancient ways of our ancestors. My son has proven himself worthy through courage, skill, and honor. According to our sacred customs, he may now choose any unmarried woman among us to be his wife. The crowd grew silent with anticipation. Even the children stopped playing and watched with wide eyes. This was not just a marriage ceremony. It was a moment that would shape the future of their tribe. Swift Arrow walked slowly toward the group of eligible women. His heart pounded as he looked at each face. Singing Bird smiled shyly and lowered her eyes respectfully. Laughing Water stood tall and proud, showing her strength and confidence. Dancing Feather's beauty seemed to glow in the sunlight. But as Swift Arrow approached, something unexpected happened. From the crowd of married women and captives watching from the edge of the ceremony, a young woman broke away and began walking toward the group of maidens. It was Pale Horse, the captive woman they had taken 3 months ago. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. What was she doing? Captives were not part of this ceremony. They were not considered eligible to be chosen by the chief's son. Running Bear started to motion for the warriors to stop her, but something made him pause. Perhaps it was the memory of his conversation with Wise Owl the night before. Or perhaps it was the strange sense of destiny he felt watching this unfold. Pale Horse walked with purpose, her pale hair flowing behind her like wheat in the wind. She wore a simple dress she had made herself, decorated with beadwork in patterns that seemed familiar yet different from the usual tribal designs. Her blue eyes, so unusual among their brown-eyed people, seemed to search the crowd with desperate intensity. Swift Arrow stopped walking and stared at this unexpected development. The woman was approaching not him, but the group of maidens. Her eyes were fixed on one particular young woman, Singing Bird, the medicine man's daughter. As Pale Horse drew closer, something remarkable happened. Singing Bird's face went pale, and her hand flew to her mouth in shock. She stared at the approaching woman as if seeing a ghost from a long-forgotten dream. The entire tribe held its breath as Pale Horse reached Singing Bird. For a moment, the two women simply looked at each other in stunned silence. Then, tears began streaming down Singing Bird's face. "Mother?" Singing Bird whispered, her voice barely audible. Is it really you?" The words hit the gathering like lightning striking dry grass. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Running Bear felt his knees go weak. Wise Owl had been right. This captive woman was not a stranger at all. Pale Horse's hands trembled as she reached toward Singing Bird's face. "My little Singing Bird," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "My beautiful daughter, I have searched for you every day for 25 winters." The crowd erupted in amazed murmurs and exclamations. Women began crying, and men stood in stunned silence. Even the children seemed to understand they were witnessing something extraordinary. Singing Bird threw herself into her mother's arms, sobbing with joy and disbelief. "I thought you were dead," she cried. "When the soldiers came and burned our village, I thought everyone was killed. Father told me you had gone to the spirit world." Running Bear's mind raced as he remembered that terrible winter 25 years ago. There had been an attack by cavalry soldiers on a smaller band of their tribe that had been camping in the northern valleys. When survivors finally reached the main village, they brought news that many had been killed or taken captive. Among the missing was a young woman named White Dove and her infant daughter. White Dove, that had been Pale Horse's real name. She had been married to a young warrior who died in that same attack. Her baby daughter had been found by another family and raised as their own when it seemed the mother would never return. The medicine man, Healing Thunder, pushed through the crowd toward the emotional reunion. He was the one who had adopted and raised Singing Bird when she was brought to them as an orphaned infant. His weathered face showed a mixture of joy and shock. "White Dove," he said softly, using her tribal name for the first time in 25 years. "The spirits have brought you home." White Dove turned to him, still holding her daughter tightly. "Healing Thunder, you saved my child. You raised her when I could not. How can I ever thank you?" "You gave birth to the most wonderful daughter a father could ask for," he replied, tears flowing down his cheeks. "She has been the light of my life. But now I understand why she always seemed to be searching for something, even when she was happy. She was searching for you." Swift Arrow stood motionless, watching this incredible reunion. The choosing ceremony had been completely forgotten as the tribe witnessed the miracle of a mother and daughter finding each other after a quarter-century apart. White Dove began to tell her story through her tears. "After the soldiers attacked, I was captured and taken far to the east. I was sold to a family of settlers who treated me like a slave. For years, I planned my escape, dreaming of finding my way back to you and our people. But the distance was so great, and I didn't know if anyone had survived." She paused, wiping tears from her eyes. "5 years ago, I finally escaped. I have been searching ever since, following rumors and stories, trying to find my people. When those raiders captured me 3 months ago, I thought it was just another tragedy. I never imagined they would bring me home." Singing Bird looked into her mother's blue eyes, the same unusual color as her own, which had always made her stand out among the tribe. "I always wondered why my eyes were different," she whispered. "Father told me it was a gift from the spirits, but I felt like part of me was missing." The crowd gradually began to understand the full magnitude of what was happening. This was not just a reunion, it was a sign from the spirits themselves. The choosing ceremony had revealed a truth that had been hidden for 25 years. Running Bear finally found his voice. "The spirits have spoken," he announced to the tribe. "This is no ordinary day. The ceremony will be postponed while we properly welcome White Dove home and celebrate this miracle." But Swift Arrow stepped forward. "No, Father," he said quietly. "I believe the spirits arranged this moment for a reason. I know now who I must choose." The crowd fell silent again, waiting to hear what the young man would say. Swift Arrow looked around at all the unmarried women, then at White Dove and Singing Bird still embracing. "I choose no one today," he declared. "The spirits have shown me that love cannot be commanded or arranged. It must be discovered naturally, as these two have discovered each other." He turned to address his father and the tribal elders. "I ask permission to wait until my heart tells me the right time has come. When I find the woman meant to be my wife, I will know her without ceremony or tradition forcing my choice." Running Bear looked at his son with new pride. Swift Arrow had shown wisdom beyond his years and respect for the sacred moment they were witnessing. The celebration that followed lasted 3 days. White Dove was formally welcomed back into the tribe with great ceremony. She shared her story with the elders, who recorded it among their oral histories. Most importantly, she and Singing Bird began the slow process of rebuilding their relationship, sharing 25 years of stories, dreams, and memories. The choosing ceremony that was meant to give Swift Arrow a wife had instead given him something far more valuable, a deeper understanding of what love really meant. In the weeks following the miraculous reunion, White Dove slowly readjusted to life among her people. The tribe built her a new lodge next to Singing Bird's, and the two women spent countless hours talking, sharing stories, and healing the wounds left by their long separation. White Dove's presence brought unexpected changes to the village. Her years among the white settlers had given her knowledge of their ways, their language, and their customs. This information proved valuable as more settlers began moving into their territory. She served as a translator and advisor, helping Running Bear negotiate with government officials and traders. "The white men see land differently than we do," White Dove explained to the tribal council one evening. "They believe it can be owned by one person like a horse or a weapon. They don't understand that the earth belongs to everyone and no one." Her insights helped the tribe avoid several conflicts that might have led to violence. She knew how to speak to the settlers in ways they could understand, while still protecting her people's interests. The elders, initially suspicious of someone who had lived so long among their enemies, began to respect her wisdom and value her counsel. Singing Bird bloomed like a flower in spring as she spent time with her mother. The sadness she had carried all her life, never knowing why she felt incomplete, finally lifted. She learned about her father, the brave warrior who had died protecting their village. White Dove shared stories of Singing Bird's early childhood, her first words, her first steps, the songs she used to love. "You were such a curious baby," White Dove told her daughter one evening as they worked together making winter moccasins. "You would crawl everywhere, touching everything, always asking questions even before you could speak properly." Singing Bird laughed. "Healing Thunder always said I asked too many questions. Now I know where that came from." The relationship between Singing Bird and her adoptive father, Healing Thunder, also grew stronger. Instead of feeling replaced by White Dove's return, he felt honored to have played such an important role in raising this remarkable young woman. The three of them formed a loving family unit that enriched the entire tribe. As autumn arrived, Swift Arrow found himself spending more time observing White Dove and marveling at her strength and resilience. She had survived terrible hardships, never gave up hope of returning home, and had maintained her spirit despite years of captivity. Her courage reminded him of the greatest warriors he knew. One day, while Swift Arrow was practicing with his bow near the river, White Dove approached him. She had been watching him train and was impressed by his skill and dedication. "You have your father's strength," she told him, "but also something else. Patience and wisdom that will make you a great leader." Swift Arrow lowered his bow and looked at her with curiosity. "You speak as if you knew my father when he was young." White Dove smiled, a hint of sadness in her blue eyes. "I did. Before I was captured, before I became a wife and mother, I was just a young woman in this tribe. Your father was already showing signs of the leader he would become. He was kind to everyone, even the smallest children and oldest elders." She paused, watching the river flow past them. "I remember when he chose your mother, Morning Star, during his choosing ceremony. The love between them was so strong, you could feel it in the air like lightning before a storm." Swift Arrow had heard many stories about his parents' love, but hearing it from White Dove's perspective added new depth to his understanding. "Do you think I was wrong to refuse to choose a wife?" White Dove considered this carefully before answering. "I think you showed great wisdom. Marriage is not something to be rushed or forced. The right person will come into your life when the time is right." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of horses approaching. A group of riders was coming toward the village, not their own warriors returning from a hunt, but strangers. As they drew closer, it became clear they were a delegation of white officials and soldiers. Running Bear emerged from his lodge, along with several other chiefs and elders. White Dove quickly moved to stand beside him, ready to translate and advise. Swift Arrow grabbed his weapons and joined his father's side. The leader of the delegation was a tall man with a gray beard wearing a blue military uniform. He dismounted and approached the chief with his hands visible, showing he came in peace. "I am Colonel Harrison from Fort Laramie," he said through an interpreter. "I seek an audience with Chief Running Bear regarding recent incidents in this territory." White Dove stepped forward before the official translator could speak. "I will translate," she said in English, then repeated it in Lakota for the benefit of her people. Colonel Harrison looked surprised to hear fluent English from an Indian woman. "You speak our language very well," he said. "I lived among your people for many years," White Dove replied calmly. "I understand your ways and the ways of my tribe. What brings you here, Colonel?" Harrison explained that there had been reports of stolen horses and missing cattle from nearby settlements. Some of the white families were blaming local tribes and demanding military action. He had come to investigate and hopefully resolve the situation peacefully. Running Bear listened to the translation and then spoke to White Dove, who relayed his words to the colonel. "Chief Running Bear says his people have taken no horses or cattle. He suggests the thieves may be white outlaws who want to cause trouble between our peoples." The negotiations continued for several hours. White Dove's ability to translate not just words but cultural concepts helped both sides understand each other. She explained to the colonel why the tribe needed to hunt in certain areas according to their seasonal patterns, and she helped Running Bear understand the settlers' fears and concerns. By evening, they had reached an agreement. The tribe would help search for the real thieves, and the colonel would ensure that his soldiers did not attack innocent Native Americans based on unfounded accusations. Both sides agreed to meet regularly to discuss any future problems before they escalated into violence. As the delegation prepared to leave the next morning, Colonel Harrison approached White Dove privately. "I have heard stories about a woman named Sarah Mitchell who disappeared from a wagon train 25 years ago. She had blue eyes and blonde hair. The family has never stopped searching for her." White Dove felt her heart skip a beat. Sarah Mitchell. That had been the name given to her by the settlers who captured her. She had almost forgotten it after living as White Dove again for these past months. "The Mitchell family still lives in Colorado Territory," the colonel continued. "They have money, land, and have been searching for their daughter all these years. If you are who I think you are, you could return to them and live as a wealthy white woman." For a moment, White Dove was silent, considering this unexpected news. Somewhere far away, there might be white people who considered her family, who had mourned her disappearance and hoped for her return. But as she looked around the village, at Singing Bird helping prepare breakfast, at the children playing near the lodges, at the familiar faces of her true people, she knew where she belonged. "Thank you for the information, Colonel," she said finally, "but I am already home." After the soldiers left, life in the village gradually returned to normal. However, the successful negotiations had elevated White Dove's status even further. The tribal council formally asked her to serve as their primary translator and cultural advisor for dealings with white settlers and government officials. As winter approached, Swift Arrow found himself drawn more and more to White Dove's wisdom and strength. She was older than the traditional age for marriage, but her experiences had given her a depth of character that the younger women, despite their many fine qualities, simply could not match. One snowy evening, as White Dove sat by her fire working on a beautiful beaded dress for Singing Bird's upcoming birthday, Swift Arrow appeared at her lodge entrance. "May I enter?" he asked formally. White Dove gestured for him to sit beside the fire. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the flames dance and listening to the wind outside. "I have been thinking about what you said regarding love and marriage," Swift Arrow said finally. "You told me the right person would come into my life when the time was right." White Dove looked up from her beadwork, meeting his sincere gaze. "I believe that time has come," he continued. "Not because of any ceremony or tradition, but because my heart has found the woman it was meant to find. Will you consider becoming my wife?" White Dove was quiet for a long moment, considering not just her own feelings, but the implications for the entire tribe. She was honored by his proposal, but she was also practical about the challenges they would face. "I am older than you," she said softly. "I have lived a complicated life, among two different peoples. I am the mother of a woman who was once eligible to be your bride. Are you certain this is what you want? Swift Arrow nodded without hesitation. I want a partner who understands both strength and compassion. Someone who has proven she can survive anything life brings. Someone who can help me lead our people through the difficult times ahead. I want you. 6 months later, on a beautiful spring morning filled with the songs of returning birds, White Dove and Swift Arrow were married in a ceremony that combined traditional tribal customs with new elements that honored their unique story. Singing Bird stood beside her mother, radiant with joy for this new chapter in both their lives. Running Bear performed the ceremony, his voice filled with pride as he spoke about love that transcends convention and wisdom that comes from experience. The entire tribe celebrated, recognizing that this marriage represented hope for their future, the joining of traditional ways with the strength needed to navigate a changing world. White Dove and Swift Arrow's marriage became a symbol of resilience and new beginnings. Together, they led their people through many challenges in the years that followed, using their combined wisdom to preserve their culture while adapting to an ever-changing world. And Singing Bird, watching her mother find happiness after so many years of struggle, learned that love could take many forms, and that family could be both the people who raised you and the people who brought you into the world. She eventually married a young warrior from a neighboring tribe, knowing she carried with her the love and lessons of all the people who had shaped her life. The story of the choosing ceremony became one of the most treasured tales in tribal history, a reminder that sometimes the spirits work in mysterious ways to bring people exactly what they need, even when it's not what they expected.